Hey, this is Matt with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and this is Wednesday, March 27th. This will be our chart lesson for today, and we've really been trending up for most of the day. Most of the overnight we trended down. We had this really steep channel working down here, and we finally kind of got a break here. It's not a real strong break, but we got a couple of closes outside of it, and then we got two legs down to a new low. And then you see prices kind of chopped around in this little range for a little bit, and then we reversed up out of here. And we've been in this channel all day for the most part until we got a break here. And what you had to be aware of, you had to remember we closed over here yesterday. So from the 8:30 open, which is down in here, right in this area to here, there's this big gap, and guess where we're at? We're filling that gap, and we had, let's see if we filled it yet. We're close. On my chart, that's where we closed yesterday, right there. So we like about one tick having filled that gap now, and that's what this move was all about, filling that gap. And notice that when we broke through up here too, I talk about this a lot. Notice that when we broke through right here, we never came back and tested that. So, um, this right here has all been a retest. Notice all those highs right across there. That's been a retest of that. But I think we're also trying to fill that gap, and we've come within a tick on my chart of filling that gap. And I mean, it doesn't mean we can't go higher than that. The market is very efficient, and I'll show you another case of that right over here. Notice that gap right there where it didn't get where, it's not a huge gap, but it's still a gap on the chart. There's no overlap. Notice how on a good healthy trend or move, most of the bars all overlap some, and when they don't, those are important areas. And look, when this move, when we finally got a correction going here, where did it go to? It came right back. Look how it filled that gap perfectly, and then we've been straight up since then. So this move back was just an opportunity to fill that gap. And it was really hard to find this trend line right here. It might even be right there. I don't know. But it fits better right here. You get all these touches up through here, and you can see it's reacting on this side once we got underneath it. But how did I find that? I drew it off these tops right across there, and then I just drug it down. Shoot. I hate when that happens, and it'll happen every time. Never grab it at the right place. But you can see I drew it off those first couple swings right in there, and and I just drug that down and placed it right down here. Let's get it back how it was, since I drug it down and messed it up. But you can see there's that line, and you take it to the top side, and it fits perfectly. That's where we turned every time, down to the other side. And notice how we were getting higher here, but we hadn't touched it yet. And when we finally touch it, that's when you get the correction down to the other side. And it's more of a sideways correction than it is a downward, but it's still a move back to the other side. And then guess what? We rock it out of there again, and then we get to the other side, and guess what happens? Then it corrects again. And so that's what you're looking for. When these prices are pulling back, they're searching for things. They're searching for previous areas, gaps, and that's what on the bigger picture, we had a big gap here, and we've been spending all day trying to fill that gap. So I want to talk about something else too. This trend channel. Somebody wrote to me today and said, no, you've made it clear that that's too steep. A trend ought to be 45 degrees. Well, I hope he just misunderstood, and that I haven't led anybody to believe that a channel, no matter how steep or flat, a trend is a trend, and you've got to abide by the trend line and the trend line rules. What I've tried to get across to you is that a trend that's this steep won't last very long because it's too steep. It doesn't mean that you can't have a trend this steep. I mean, you could get a trend like this that could go forever. But most healthy trends, look at this one, it's more of a 45-degree angle, and it's a more healthy trend. And those kind of trends will continue further and usually last longer. And even that's not written in stone, but most healthy trends are at about a 45-degree angle. Doesn't mean you can't have a real steep downward trend or a real steep upward trend or even a real flat trend. We've even had real flat trends. This is trending up. It's not real steep though. It's kind of flat. There's your trend line maybe right across there. Let's just look at that real quick, just so you can see it in real. You got in real time. You can see that right across there. You got a trend channel, and it's flatter. And guess what? It didn't last very long. It gets a break, and then it tries to go lower, and then you get more of a 45-degree angle right here, and that's a good, healthy trend. So don't mistake that you can't have. I mean, you could have a trend steeper than this, but generally they don't last very long. But still, the rules and the trend line and everything else come to play. And you'll get a lot of trends that, sometimes you don't know if it has to go off of the top of two bars. Sometimes it'll be like that, but I think this person probably drew it like that, and then they were wanting to know why this failed right here. But there's other reasons why this failed that we'll talk about in a minute. But notice if you get that trend line right there, you can't really, you might make it fit right there. I guess that probably still fits, but it doesn't fit real well. So what I did was drew it off here and across these, and then I just make sure I don't grab it in the wrong place, and I just drag it up. So to me, that's the trend line right there, and that's where we got the bounces from. We tried to bounce there. We went a little lower, and then we made one more push, and then we bounced. And to me, that looks like the proper trend. And you can see it's still holding right down through here, and then we finally, but you got a break here, and you got two legs down, but still doesn't matter. And I'll talk about it. He was more interested in this trade right here, why the short didn't work, but I'll talk about that in a minute, and we'll get there. But there's not a lot of entries today, but you didn't need a lot of entries. Most of them were really good. Two of them were excellent, and actually three of them really. So I'll talk about the trades, and then we'll come back. And but hopefully that's clear on the trend lines. You could have a trend line almost straight down, and you got to, if it's a trend line and it's holding, or a trend channel, you can't ignore it. You can't say, well, that's too steep or that's too narrow. No, the idea is that a healthy trend is about a 45-degree angle. And so if that was unclear or I confused anybody on that, that's not the case. But obviously this person was, that's not what they heard, or they were just confused about it. So don't think that you can't have steeper trends or trend channels, down or up, or flatter trends or trend channels, because they happen. And this is just a little downtrend right here. It's not very steep, and you notice it didn't last very long, but you can kind of see that working down through there. And a lot of times if you can't find it, draw it off the low side. And there it is. You see how I did that? I drew it off the low side. Copy it, paste, and drag it up, and there's your little channel. And you can see that right there. It's fairly clear. And then we finally overshot it to the downside, and the trend continued. This bigger channel was the overriding factor, but you can see that. That's kind of a little downward. It almost looks like a trading range, but it's not. It is a trading range too, but it's more of an angled, shallow trend that just didn't last very long. So hopefully that makes sense to you, and hopefully I didn't confuse anybody else with that. But that's another reason, if you have one of the manuals, the price action manual, don't just read it through once or twice. Make sure you go back and read it over and over and over, because you'll pick up little nuggets like that every single time you read it. And, and if you're unclear about something, ask, and I'll try to clarify it if I haven't been able to clarify it already. So. Okay, I had an extended interruption there, so I don't think I've even started talking about the trades yet. So let's talk about the trades, and we'll go from there. All right, let's just start with the first trade here. This was really the first opportunity to even enter on this big move down. This was the only trade that I took prior to the regular open. There really weren't any good setups in here till this one right here, and I'll explain that in a minute. But this is just a two-legged pullback to the EMA, to the trend line. And again, I found the trend line off of this low side and drug it up. So I was just waiting on prices to come up here and give me a setup. I meant to have this kind of, let me redraw this here. You could have entered below this bar. It's not the prettiest setup because there's 3 overlapping bars there. So if you didn't take that one, I can understand why. And then there was kind of a pullback here. So this is kind of a second entry coming off the top side. And so if you didn't enter here, and what I did, I just dropped a limit order in here about halfway, and it got filled. Sometimes they don't, but that's the way I traded that because I didn't want to take a chance because of all that stem. Let me just make this a little bit bigger here. Because of all of that stem and those 3 overlapping bars, I was a little nervous about this one. And notice too, all these kind of matching highs right across here. Just to make it a little easier to see, I'll drag this over here. And you can see prices broke up. So it's kind of a failed break higher, but we're looking for reasons to go short. And there's been no break of the trend line or anything. We did get a couple of closes outside of it here. I wasn't sure if that's enough to turn the trend, but as you see when we get down here, you'll see that it was. And this was an easy scalp, easy move. You could have got a couple 3 points out of any runner, so it was a pretty good trade. And you know, you don't know how far these are going to go, but you got another break right here too. So by this time, you know, I'm figuring we've got a break of the trend line, and you know, and then we kind of go into this trading range. And let me just drag this down too. And you can kind of see that little trading range across there. Really, I think that's the highs. It's kind of across there. It found resistance right there too, but then it just went up to the next spot. And guess what this comes back and does? It takes the runners on this second entry. The market's just efficient. And but anyway, I was looking at this as 2 legs down to a new low. And notice how we kind of didn't go very far, and then you get this break, and you get this big reversal out of here. And there was a second entry long here, but it's a little risky going long at this point. I was still thinking about looking for another short, and this is where somebody else had some issues here. They were looking at a different trend line, and let's just put that on there. I just want to look at it again. If you drew that right off those tops, I could see how you could get that, but notice how nothing's coming into play at all down through there. And then notice how you can't really get the lows off of this. If you bring it all the way down here, you can, but notice how we don't even get down there, and then we're reversing above it. So to me, it just doesn't fit, and this is what I see right here. And so to me, there's a trend line break and 2 legs down to a new low. And you don't always have to be precise, but you can't be so far off that it throws you off. But even so, obviously some other people saw this, but by the time you get into 1, 2, 3 overlapping bars, this is congestion, which all congestion is a small trading range. And what happens when prices break out of a trading range? They snap back. So we broke out the high side, it snaps back, it goes down, it breaks out the low side, and guess what? It snaps back, and it goes a lot higher. So it's a failed second entry short right there. So that's a short trap. You got to take that long right there. Even if we don't know it's reversing, you figure we're going to get another leg similar to this one probably. And there's definitely enough room to scalp out and so forth. It's a little bit doji, so you get in real easy, real cheap. It's easy scalp. We don't go much further, and we come back down and we test that same area again, and it goes up. And it was really tempting to go long here. I almost went long, but you know, the overall trend is still kind of down at this point, and there's a chance we could make another leg like this one down. So I was still thinking short, but I don't like these short setups either because now we got too much support right across here. So So that's the reason I didn't like these shorts, and I really wasn't crazy. And you can kind of see there's a trading range here. Now, you probably would have had this more down like that right there. And so you really need to see some support on the top of that and then go higher from there. Or you got to get a break out the low side again to get on. And there's just not really a good setup in there. Even if you use this for the highs, there might have been enough room right there to scalp out. And actually, if you'd have taken, I think either one of those shorts would have worked. But I just didn't like them. They're not good setups, so I didn't mark them. Yeah, that one would have worked, and this one easily would have worked. So either one of them would have worked, and it was a downward bias, and we were into the trend. So, but I was thinking about the gap. We already had a new low, and when we couldn't get any lower than this was telling right here. And you couldn't help but take this. The reason you took this one was the short trap. Like I said, those are almost always good. If it had been a long trap, you know, and actually there is a long trap right here because here's the first leg, pull back, second leg, and it wouldn't have been any good. It wouldn't have been good for a scalp, and then it turns down. So technically, I guess there was enough reason to go short, but by that time there's 3 overlapping bars there, really 2. You know, it's an inside bar. I actually like this short better than I did this one. Either one of them would have worked. But I was, you know, personally, I was thinking long because of the gap and the fact that we'd gotten outside this trend line. You can see once we got out and we got back inside, it's still kind of holding, but there's not really a good setup there. No reason you want to go short right there. Look at all that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 overlapping bars, all of them basically inside bars. No, you don't want to, because you're going to break out of that and snap right back. And a real aggressive trader probably would have gone long right down here. I considered a limit order here and talked myself out of it because I just wasn't 100% sure that we were done to the downside. I was afraid we were going to get a little correction and then another leg like this leg right here, which would have put prices on down here a little further. But when you saw this reversal right here, you got to take that trade right there. And I mean, that's a perfect setup. Notice all those overlapping bars. It ticked 1 tick lower, and then I actually went long above these two, but if not there, definitely there. And the reason I went long above those two is because we broke lower first and then turned up, and in the same bar went out the other side. That's indicative of a trap right there, and generally means you're going to go much higher. So I figure we're coming back up here at the very least. Do I know we're going to start this big trend? No, but guess what? My runners were safe. And so this just a single runner here could have made you, let's just see what it could have made you. You would have been in at 48, and you could have rode this to the close, still be long to 50. That's 10 points right there so far you could have made out of that. Even if you exited in here, 48 to, let's just say 54, 55. So there's another 5 or 6 points just if you only rode it to there. But until you get a break of a trend line and a new high, you probably should consider staying with it. You may exit on a break of the trend line, but even then, you know there's probably going to be a retest on a proven trend, and you know we're trying to fill this gap. And guess what? We filled that gap now. So that's interesting too. But this was a great setup, and then you just get a little pull back. And you might have been tempted to go long here, but look at all the overlap again. And we hadn't got back to the possible trend line. And at this point, you might have even had it down here because I was thinking, you know, it's either going to be here or here. But when we bounced right there, I was pretty comfortable. I didn't wait on this bar right here. I went ahead and went long right there. It did back up, but it took off real fast. But notice what happened when it broke above this bar. It was off to the right. That was an easy scalp. And if you got in down here, guess what? They didn't get your break-even stops on your runners. If you got in right here, 1 tick above, then they came back and got them. So that's pretty standard. So this was a pretty good setup. Plus, it's just a 2-legged pullback to the. You might have got trapped in or tricked in right there because that is a second entry long. But I was trying to figure out where the trend line was, and at that point I was thinking it might even be here or here, um, or right there, and we weren't there either way. So luckily I held tight. If you got trapped in right there, when that bar ended like that and turned down right like that right there, you got a chance to get out a couple of different times. When that bar ended right there, if I'd have got in right there, I definitely would have exited, or maybe I would have given a little more room to see if it was going to bounce here. But that's too risky. It really is. So if you did get tricked right here and went long, then the only thing I could tell you was when you saw this bar right here, that's not what you want to see. You want to see a move out like, look what happened on all these other moves out. If you don't see a move out like that, then exit and wait for another entry. And so if you'd have just waited right here, you could have got a tick easy on this. It gave you more than one chance to get out with a tick. Definitely out at break even, and at the very worst, you would have lost a tick or so. Um, so that's what I would have done right there. I could see some people getting tricked right there. But we're coming off the upper side. This was easy to find over here. Once you come off that upper side and start trending down, you got to expect we're going to the other side. And so it was just a matter of trying to figure out where that was. And it was really hard to figure out. It was. I'll give you that. But you should have known it was either here, here, or here. And it's most likely going to be here or here, off the lows of these bars here. So, and really you could still argue that it was here and that you just had kind of a midpoint on it, but it doesn't fit as well. I guess you could say it maybe a little. But personally, I was playing it from here at that point. And again, you might have gotten tricked on this one as well. I drew this whole thing in green, and if you had it drawn right here like I did, you were probably tempted to go long right here, which I went long right here. Actually, what I did, because this was a doji, I dropped a limit order when it broke above, and it pulled back and filled it almost instantly. So I got a pretty quick fill, and by doing it that way, you'll see I got out. My entry was at 33.75, and or wait, 53.75. I'm sorry. And so it only had to break above that bar right there. And I got a little nervous when it pulled back, but when it bounced right off the line again, I felt pretty I actually thought we were going to go a whole lot higher right there. But it got me out of my trade. No runners, because it didn't get any runners on that. And then and then you might have, but notice by that point, there's no other entries across here because, let me get this out of the way, because look at all the overlap now. And guess what happens when it failed out the low side? It snaps back, and it couldn't get out the high side. It found resistance right there again, and then it's kind of working its way down. And then finally, we broke lower and got a second entry long. And we're going back to test the highs. So I like this one right here because we finally broke out of there. We had a failed breakout pullback short that reversed, and a chance to go long right here above that bar. And you see it took a little while, and if you didn't go long right here, you may not have caught this trade because it was a little iffy by the time you had all this overlap. So if you didn't go long above these two on the second entry, then you probably wouldn't have wanted to go long after that, because it's just not a very good, it doesn't look like a very good setup now. It still turned out to be one, but they tricked a lot of people. So I mean, there's positives of waiting on the second entry and negatives to waiting on better entries, because sometimes you get left behind. But that brings up, somebody said that I started to talk about that the other day. Let's go back, since that's the last trade. Let's go back and talk about this point right here. Somebody was, I've got to come out, I always get left behind, and you notice that jumped up there real fast and then kind of took off. And what I do is drop a limit order in. If it does that sometimes you'll get lucky and you can drop it right there and you can sneak in a tick earlier, but you're taking a gamble by doing that. If it jumps before you and it's trading up here before you can get in, just drop a limit order exactly where your stop entry would have been, and a lot of times it will fill that. It's amazing how many times it will fill it and then go on. But even if it didn't, notice how it came back and it would have filled. Well, it may not have filled a limit order right there. Um, so I don't know if you'd got filled on that one or not. But don't chase it way up in here because guess what? You'll end up entering right in here and then it's coming lower. And guess what? You're getting burned. And there really was a chance to enter here on a failed second entry short, but this went a little bit higher. But notice one entry right there and then the second entry. So that's kind of a two-legged pullback to the EMA. But again, I don't like that bar. I didn't take this. I didn't like it. I was really done after this trade. Plus, I was still managing my runner off of this one. So, and notice it didn't come back and get the runners here. So another runner up here, and I exited somewhere in all this mess here. And then that was really it for today. We already talked about this. Once you started to see this, you really needed to wait on something bigger to happen. And guess what? I wanted to show you that too. I talked about market efficiency. Remember that gap right there. Look where this came to. Just enough to fill that gap, and then it reversed and went higher. So that was another reason I liked going long there. And that's another example that, hey, it would have come back and you could have put your stop order there and it still would have got filled. It's hard for people to enter right here on long on a stop though, actually, or a limit order right here because they're scared of it. But that's where you're looking to enter down here on these lows. And if you draw your line across here, you can see that we came back and tested it. Broke a little bit lower, filled that gap, went higher, pulled back, tested it to the tick, and then went higher. And that's the reason I like that second entry right there. And it was a nice trade. And you'd want to exit probably right in here. It's not worth hanging on for this. Maybe you did. I don't know. We could go higher yet because it's still, 20 minutes, 25 minutes left in the trading day. But I was done by here. And that's my trades for today. So, it's two fairly simple channels to find. This one might have been a little harder, and the low side of this one was it's really confusing, I'll admit. But it's so easy when you can't find it off one side to find it off the other. And that one's obvious. It's almost too obvious, and it may be more like that right there. And you just copy that and drag it down. And now I don't know why the lower one looks different. I must have moved it somehow when I changed it when I moved it a minute ago. And you drag it down. Oh yeah, and that looks, that's what I was seeing earlier. I was catching it off of these two lows here, and that's right where that one bounced, and then we tried to bounce again. And we finally broke below your trend line break, and you can see it coming back into play up here. So notice how it's working from the underside. That's a good sign that there's some kind of trend line up through there. And that was why I like that one so much. So, and let's move it down here now and see how it looks. That could have been it right there too. So you're getting action on both sides there. And if you drug it all the way to the low, then you're getting, so either way, you still got your break down here no matter where you put it. And you still would have had your longs on these and understood why these were not so good. This one was fairly good because it was a second entry, but when we didn't go anywhere after that, then we're in the trading range, and you got to wait on a failed break, and the trend is to the upside, the bias is up, and there you go. You get a second entry long, and off you go. It's, I don't know any other way. That's how this line keeps getting off. I don't know. I never can move those things. I always grab them in the wrong spot. So I still like it there. I really do. And you can almost see it working from the underside. So what we may have is there may be a bigger channel. And that's just the center. So if you put it like that right there, it looks like kind of like that, but this is where the other spot was, and then it don't look so good. So, you know, it's work. Both of them are working. That's all I can say. It's the same trend line. Some people probably saw it the way I saw it, and others probably saw it this way. So you can't argue with either one. Now we're kind of in between these two. So you can't argue with either one of them. So, but this is getting a little long. We're 30 minutes worth here. Hopefully everybody understood about the trend channels, and they're not confused in thinking that you know, just because it's steeper than what, a 45 degree, let me just say this and we'll call it a day. A good healthy trend is 45 degrees. However, that doesn't mean you can't have a steeper or a shallower trend in either direction. So a trend line is a trend line, and if it's holding prices, it's valid, and you don't care how steep it is. You got to pay attention to it until you get a break and a retest. And so just remember that, and hopefully that's clear. And if it wasn't clear, I apologize to anybody that was confused. So, but anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you tomorrow.